The sun showed no mercy that day. It beat down so fiercely it seemed to burn everything it touched. The ground was cracked and thirsty, and the air shimmered like melted glass. In the middle of that blazing emptiness, a young woman stumbled through tall, dead grass. Her hands were tied in front of her, the rough ropes digging deep into her wrists until the skin turned red and raw. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps. Each step felt like a battle she was losing. She tripped and fell hard. The ground tore at her knees, and dust filled her mouth, choking her as she coughed weakly. For a long time she stayed there, the heat pressing her into the dirt like a cruel punishment. Then something caught her eye, a half-buried barrel, old and broken, its wood splintered and dry. Dragging herself forward, she crawled toward it, her bound hands scraping through the dirt. When she reached it, she tried to pull herself upright. The barrel cracked under her grip, leaving splinters in her palms, but she leaned against it anyway. It was all she had left to hold on to. Her dress was torn and stained with dust and blood. Her hair stuck to her face in sweaty strands. Flies buzzed around her, landing on her arms, her lips, and her open wounds. She tried to wave them away, but her arms were too weak to move. Her whisper came out dry and broken. "Please, God, I'm not like this." The still air broke, the faint sound of hooves echoed in the distance. Slow, steady, getting closer. Her body tensed. Her eyes darted to the horizon. A horse approached, carrying a tall rider who cast a dark shape against the burning sun. Panic shot through her chest, but her body refused to move. Her muscles had given up. Only her mind was still fighting. She pressed her forehead against the scorching wood and whispered, barely audible, "Not again. Please, not again." The rider stopped a few feet away. The horse snorted, pawing at the dry earth. Then came the sound of boots hitting the ground, heavy, deliberate. Spurs clinked with each step. A shadow fell over her. She turned her head just enough to see him through her fading vision. The sunlight hit his face, but the shape of a gun at his hip was clear. Her heartbeat quickened once, twice, then steadied into something empty and slow. "Don't untie me," she breathed. "Just do it." The man froze. Even the wind seemed to pause. Only the buzz of flies and the soft creak of saddle leather filled the silence. He stood there for a moment, looking down at her. Her lips trembled, her eyes unfocused. She already looked halfway gone. He saw the bruises, the burn mark on her arm, and the dirt that clung to every pore of her face. He didn't speak right away. Then slowly, he removed his hat, letting the sunlight hit his weathered face. His name was Jack Callahan, 58 years old, a man who had lost nearly everything, but still held on to the small habit of doing what was right. He had seen death, caused it even. But this wasn't just death. This was cruelty carved into a person's skin. He knelt beside her. "Miss," he said softly, "you're safe now." She laughed, a weak, broken sound. "Safe." Her voice cracked on the word. "There's no safe, not while he's still alive." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Who?" She tried to answer, her eyes wide but unfocused, her lips trembling. One word came out, "Wade." Then her body went limp. Her head dropped forward, and she collapsed against him, her breath shallow. Jack caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin was hot with fever. He lifted her easily. She weighed almost nothing. Her wrists were still bound, the rope stained with dried blood. He looked toward the horizon, jaw tight. The name Wade echoed in his mind like a curse. He knew that name. And he knew this wasn't some random accident. He looked down at the woman again, the quiet rise and fall of her chest, the marks around her wrists. And in that silence, Jack felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of responsibility. "Oh, hell," he muttered. "All right, miss. You found the wrong man to beg from. I ain't the one who'll kill you." He lifted her onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and turned toward the valley. The sun burned behind them, and the wind carried a faint smell of dust, blood, and gun oil. Somewhere far away, a crow cried out. Jack didn't look back. Jack rode for hours before stopping. He sat there for a long while, holding the unconscious woman in his arms. The ropes around her wrists looked like they'd been there for days. He pulled out his pocket knife and carefully cut through them. She flinched when the tension snapped, and her hands fell limp, the skin bruised and bleeding. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice rough but gentle. She didn't answer. Her eyes rolled back, and she went still again. Jack looked to the horizon. No sign of riders, no dust clouds, only the heavy stillness of heat and cicadas humming in the distance. He adjusted her position and started riding again, keeping her steady against him. The only sounds were the horses' hooves and the sigh of the wind. Every so often she'd twitch, mumbling half-formed words, names, places, maybe prayers. Jack didn't listen too closely. He knew pain had its own language. By the time they reached his ranch, the sun was melting behind the hills. The old house stood silent and tired, paint peeled, fences crooked, the barn leaning like it had given up years ago. It wasn't much, but it was home and safe enough for now. Jack carried the woman inside and laid her on a narrow cot in the spare room. He poured some water into a tin cup and touched a few drops to her lips. She stirred, but her eyes stayed shut, the fever still burning through her. He sat beside her, rubbing the back of his neck. He promised himself long ago that he wouldn't try to save anyone ever again. Too many graves behind him already. And yet, here he was. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she did was reach for her wrists. She stared at them, tracing the marks left by the ropes. "You untied me," she whispered. Jack nodded. Seemed like the right thing to do. Her eyes studied his face, suspicious at first, then softer. "Why help me? You don't even know who I am." He shrugged. "Don't need to. You just look like someone who's had enough hurt for one lifetime." Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she looked past him, as if the memory itself was too heavy. "My name's Clara," she said quietly. "I was a teacher once back east." Jack nodded slowly. The word teacher sounded strange out here, in this place where nothing grew right anymore. "What brought you all the way out here, Clara?" She hesitated. "They told me I'd be teaching. That it was a new school." She swallowed hard. "Telit." Jack didn't ask more. He didn't have to. He'd seen that look before, back when men did worse things under another flag. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the distant scent of rain. Jack turned toward the door. He had plenty of questions, but none that would find answers tonight. As he stepped out into the fading light, one thought cut through his mind like a cold knife. If Clara was telling the truth, then the devil himself had come back to Montana. The next morning came slow. Too quiet. Jack was out by the water trough, giving the horse a drink. The heat was already rising, the kind that made the air shimmer over the ground. Clara sat on the porch, wrapped in one of Jack's old shirts, her eyes scanning the horizon like she expected something or someone to appear. She didn't talk much, and Jack didn't ask much. That silence suited them both. By noon, the cicadas were screaming, and the air smelled thick with storm and dust. Then, faintly, came the sound of hooves again. Jack looked up sharply, his hand resting near his holster. The sound came from the south road, not from town. A rider appeared, a woman small, her horse limping as she approached. She slid off before the horse even stopped, her clothes covered in trail dust. Jack blinked twice. Eliza. She looked thinner than he remembered, hairpin messy, face pale but determined. "Jack," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't know where else to go." Jack frowned. "Eliza Reed, Tom's wife. You look like Hellgirl. What happened?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small wooden box, holding it close like it might vanish if she let go. "I brought something," she said. "You need to see it." Jack took the box. It felt heavier than it looked. He opened it carefully. Inside were letters, papers, names written in neat handwriting, and some folded bills. But one thing froze him, a page covered in Tom's handwriting. "Eliza," he said slowly, "what is this?" Her voice cracked. "It's everything, Jack. Everything Wade's been doing and Tom's part in it." She sucked in a shaky breath that ended in a sob. "I tried to stop him. I begged him. But he said Wade owns him now. Said there's no way out except death." Jack's jaw tightened. He flipped through the papers. Names of women, dates, payments, all of it written clear as day. His stomach turned cold. "Eliza," he said quietly, "you shouldn't have brought this here. If Wade finds out, he'll send men after you." "I know," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "That's why I came to you. You're the only one he's afraid of." Jack didn't respond. He just stared toward the horizon. The sunlight bounced off his hat brim, blinding bright. He could almost feel the storm coming, rolling closer every second. Clara stepped onto the porch, her eyes wide as she spotted Eliza. For a moment, all three of them stood there, bound together by fear, family, and the shadow of one man's evil. Jack lifted the box again, holding it like it was cursed. His voice dropped low. "If Wade's coming," he muttered, "then hell's coming with him. If Wade was coming, then trouble rode with him. So stick with me, partner. Grab a cup of tea or coffee if that's your style. Drop your city and the time where you're tuning in from. And if you're still riding along with this tale, tap subscribe so you don't miss what's about to turn Jack Callahan's world upside down." Morning hit like a hammer. Jack saddled up with the heavy calm of a man who'd already chosen his path. Behind him, the ranch shrank into the heat haze. Ahead, a flat stretch of empty land ran out toward the ruined church Eliza had described. She'd begged him not to ride alone. Clara said nothing. She only watched from the porch, fear soft in her eyes. Jack knew that look. It often meant goodbye. The air wavered as he rode. Dust clung to his coat. Sweat traced his neck. Every fence post looked like a grave marker for someone this land had swallowed. By the time the steeple showed against the sky, the world had gone quiet except for flies and the slow creak of leather. The church leaned tired in the weeds. Windows were empty holes. The doors hung loose like broken teeth. Jack swung down, looped his reins over a split rail, and stood still. "Anyone there?" he called. Only the echo came back. Then a voice slid out of the shade. "Always figured you'd take your time dying, Captain." Jack turned just enough to catch him. Corbin, Wade's right hand. A man Jack had once marked beside, back when law and chaos wore the same coat. "So Wade sent you," Jack said. Corbin smiled, thin and mean. "He sent me to remind you of your place. You don't belong in his affairs." Jack's fingers hovered near his Colt. "I'm not in his affairs. I'm cleaning them up." The grin drained from Corbin's face. For a heartbeat, even the air held still. "You can walk away," Jack said quietly. "Son, you still got that choice." What came next needed no words. Two guns cleared leather. The first shot cracked the silence open. Dust leapt. Jack staggered, fire burning along his shoulder. Corbin dropped to his knees, red spreading in the dust. He tried to speak, but the wind took the words. Jack stood steady, breath tight, smoke curling from his barrel. He glanced down. Something flashed near Corbin's hand, brass lighter. Jack picked it up and turned it over. Scratched on the side were letters, rough but clear, T.C. Tom Callahan. The wind changed tone, hot air skimming the grass with the scent of rain and powder. Jack closed his fist around the lighter. For the first time in years, his eyes stung. He looked west. Dark clouds were piling up fast. "All right, little brother," he said under his breath. "If that's the way of it, come find me." Thunder rolled across the flats. The first cold drops hit the dust like dark coins. And far beyond that wall of rain, Tom Callahan was already turning his horse toward home. Night came with a storm. Rain hit hard and sudden, washing blood and dust off the ground. Jack rode fast, one hand pressed to his shoulder, the other tight on the reins. Lightning ripped the sky and lit the road like a white blade. He didn't pray. He just spoke his brother's name with each breath. The ranch rose out of the rain, the valley churning with wind. The barn doors slammed open and shut. Clara stood by the porch holding a lantern that swung wild in the gusts. Inside the house, Eliza cried out something Jack couldn't hear. He hit the ground running and pushed through the door. Tom was there, soaked, angry, and shaking somewhere between rage and shame. He held a gun, but his eyes were worse than the barrel. They looked beaten from the inside. Why, Tom? Jack's voice was worn thin, more tired than mad. You could have built something honest. You could have done better than this. Tom's mouth trembled. I tried. His voice was hoarse. But Wade owns everything, the law, the folks, me. You made your choices, Jack said softly. But you can choose again. Right now. Tom's hand shook. The storm howled around the house. Then came the sound that slices a room in two, a single shot. When the smoke thinned, Tom lay on the floorboards, his gun still warm. Jack dropped to his knees beside him. Blood crept between the cracks of old wood, the same floor where two boys had once chased marbles and laughed until Pa told them to hush. Tom looked for Jack's eyes and found them. Being decent, Tom whispered, it never saved anyone. Jack shook his head, tears mixing with the rain dripping from his hat brim. It saved you now. Tom's chest rose once more, then stilled. Outside, the wind began to settle. Thunder rolled farther off, melting into the mountains. Jack stepped into the wet night. Clara stood there with a lantern, holding Eliza close. None of them spoke. Jack gave one small nod, the kind that says too much and not enough at the same time. By dawn, the storm had walked on. The air smelled new and clean. Jack saddled two horses in slow, careful motions and brought them to the yard. He handed Clara an old book, its pages worn and spine cracked, Great Expectations. It was one of the last pieces left from his life before the world turned rough. Keep it, he said. Teach again. Make it count. Clara gave a faint smile. You're coming with us, aren't you? Jack looked north, where the hills were a line of light on the wet grass. I'll ride a while, he said. Still things to put right. The sun pushed through the last clouds. For the first time in years, the land looked rinse clean. Maybe being decent didn't fix the whole world, but it could still change a few hearts that were willing to listen. Maybe that was enough. So tell me, friend, do you think a man can claw his way back after losing it all? Does decency still matter in a place like this? If this story gave you a pause, drop a like and subscribe so you can ride with us again. There are more trails ahead, waiting for First Light.